Today's lesson, we're going to head into section 5.6. We're going to try to graph what's called a linear inequality, which uses the same properties as graphing a line. So as you look at this first definition up here on the board, it explains what the picture may look like when you graph an inequality. The thing to be considered is that when you graph a linear inequality, you will have a solution region that will be shaded. And within this region, there's all sorts of solutions. And those will be points all over the place. Millions and millions and millions of points. Okay? And that's the key. That's what we're trying to find. And by showing an illustration of it, that's one way to do so. So the question is, well, how do you go about doing this? Well, to get that illustration, you go through these 3 steps. So step number 1, you're going to graph that line just like you would graph a normal line. But look at this. Sometimes you use a solid line and sometimes you use the dashed line. And it depends on the inequality symbols that you see. Step 2, we want you to test a point that's not on the line and see if it's a solution for the inequality. Step 3, if the test point is a solution, then shade the half of the plane that contains that point. If that test point is not a solution, then shade the other half plane that does not contain the point. We also have another way we could do this that we'll talk about in just a moment. So to do this, what I want everybody to, the lesson will contain information from Alex. So what I'd like everybody to do is go to Alex and find lesson 5.6, and I want you to open it. Now, once again, when we do this lesson, we're all going to have different questions, but they'll be similar types. So let me give you a preview. Everybody go to question number 1. This inequality that I see is a special case. It only has one variable, x. So if you recall, that is a vertical line that passes through the x-axis at -2. So I'm going to choose my line tool. I'm going to go to -2 on the x-axis, and I'm going to choose another point on the x-axis somewhere that has an x coordinate of -2. Now I have a vertical line, so that's correct. However, what I need to pay close attention to is that symbol right there. That causes me to use a dotted line. So I'm going to use that tool, and I'm going to click on there. And now what I see is that I've changed it into a dotted line. Okay. Now, the last thing I need to do is I need to pay particular attention to this symbol. And that symbol, if I read from the letter to the number, says x is greater than -2. Now, when you look at the x-axis, look at this number -2. Which way are the numbers greater on the x-axis? Well, they're greater over here, aren't they? That's right. So I'm going to use the shading tool now, which is this one, and I'm going to shade on that side which I pointed to before. I'm going to go ahead and check my answer, and I'm going to see that that is correct. Now, what this implies is that any point that lies out here in the shaded region would be an answer to this inequality, any of those. Okay, I'd like everybody to go on to the next question. This one is similar. This time, my equation is, it only has one letter again, but this time it's y. And so what I have to remember is that that is a horizontal line. It passes through the y-axis at 6. So I'm going to take my line tool. I'm going to go on the y-axis, put a point on 6, and then I'm going to go somewhere to the left or to the right at the same height of 6, and I have my line drawn correctly. But this is an inequality. I need to look once again at this symbol. I'm going to circle it for you. There's no line under it, so I know that that's a dotted line. So I'm going to click on there. Okay? Now the next thing I need to look at is, where do I shade this? Well, I want everybody to think about the y-axis. I want you to read this question to yourself. Start with the letter y and read it. This says y is less than 6. Now look at the y-axis. Here's the number 6. Where do the numbers get smaller or less than 6? Well, that's obviously down here. They get smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's the side which I will shade. So I'm going to use my shading tool. I'm going to click over here. Let's try that again. And there we go. That's the correct solution. But I'll check it just to make sure. And yes, we are correct. Let's go to the next question, number 3. Okay, everybody, number 3. Look at that inequality. So what we have to remember is how to graph this. We need slope and we need a y-intercept. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and rewrite this. There's a -1, excuse me, in front of that x. And I can write any number as a fraction if I write it over 1. So let's remember a couple things. This number here is your y-intercept. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot a point at 4. And the next thing I need to do is I need to identify my slope. Here it is. Now remember, rise over run. So the top number is a rise. So in this case, because it's negative, I'll go down 1. Bottom number is positive, I go to the right. So going back to this line, here's my y-intercept. I need to go down 1 over 1 and put a point. So I'm going to go ahead and click right here. And now I have my line drawn, but I need to make a decision. Is this a dotted or a solid line? So what I need to do is I need to look at this symbol, and I see that there's a line under it, which indicates it's solid. So I'm going to keep it just like it is. Okay, now here's the last step. We need to either test a point or use a different method of solving. So I'm going to start by testing a point. Okay, everyone? I'm going to test a point. So I'm going to pick a point that exists somewhere out in the coordinate plane. And I think I'm just going to use 0, 0 because it looks like it's pretty easy to use. So both x and y are defined as 0 and 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over here to this line. And I am going to substitute those two numbers in. Okay, everyone? So 0 is y. Now this right here I could just write as -1. X is 0 as well. And I have plus 4. And I'm going to see how this turns out. -1 times 0 is 0, and that's a 4. Now I'm going to read that to myself. 0 is less than or equal to 4. Hey, that's true, isn't it? Well, what that means then is that I should be shading on that side of the line where that point is that where I tested. Now I can see it's down below that line. So I'm going to click on my shading tool, and I'm going to shade over here, and there's the answer. I'm going to go ahead and check it. And yes, we are correct. Okay. Let's go ahead and go to another question. Now, there's another way to do this as well. We may talk about that in class. Okay, everybody go to question number 4. You'll get something like this. And go ahead and we can talk about this together again. So if you're having trouble with yours, let's talk about it. Now remember that -2 could be written as -2 over 1. We need to first graph this. All right, let's get this down here. Now my y-intercept is b, right, everybody? That's at -2. So I'm going to go ahead and use my line tool, and I'm going to put a point at -2. Okay, so there's the first point for this line. Now I'm going to look at my slope. Top numbers tell me to go down 2, bottom number to the right 1. So from this y-intercept right here, I need to go down 2, right 1. And I should be putting a point right there. And there we go. Let me see if I can get rid of that other point. Next thing I need to do is make a decision. What type of a line is this? Now, it doesn't matter which way the inequality symbol is facing. It's whether or not it has that line under it. This one does. It means it's equal. That means that the line does contain solution points. I'm going to leave it like it is because that's a solid line. All right, so the last thing we need to do is we need to figure out which side of this boundary line we should shade. Okay, everybody, pick a point. 0, 0 is a good point to use if you can. But don't use it, remember this is X and this is Y, if it's on the line. It's not a good idea. So Y is 0. Here's my slope again, right? I'm just going to write it as -2. X is 0. Let's calculate this. That's 0 minus 2 is -2. Now I got to read that to myself carefully. Is 0 greater than, bigger than, or equal to -2? It is bigger, right? Hey, here's another true statement like we had in the last one. If it's true, then shade on the side of your test point. If it's false, shade on the other. Here's my shading tool, and there we go. Go ahead and check your answer. And we see that's correct. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Okay, here's another one. We've got to graph this inequality. Now, what we want to do here is a little work on this. We want to solve this for y first so we could get it into a form that we're able to graph. So do you remember the steps of going through this? The first thing we always want to do is we want to take the variable that has the x and move it to the other side. And then we want to see what we have left over. That's gone. Drop this down. Keep that symbol. Now, if you recall, we want to put this 2x first, and it cannot be combined with the negative 20. Do you remember the next step? We got to get rid of that 5. It's being multiplied, right? So we're going to divide by 5. Now, at this point, I'm going to tell you something. What can happen is if you divide by a negative number, what happens is it reverses the inequality symbol. But this one will not. I'm going to leave my slope as a fraction. 20 divided by 5 is 4. And now I'm ready to graph. As you can see, my y-intercept is negative 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put a point on negative 4. There we go. There's my first point. My slope is 2/5. So I'm going to just count up 2 and go right 5. And there we go. I'm going to look at my inequality symbol carefully. I see there is no line under it. So I'm going to switch this to a dotted line. Now what I want to do is I want to test a point. So I'm going to use this point 0, 0. X is 0, y is 0. I'm going to plug those numbers in here. 0, 0 is a great point to use. It's easy to calculate with. Let's see what kind of a statement we get. Read it to yourself. 0 is less than negative 4. No, this is false. So in this case, my test point is actually not in the solution region. So when I shade, I'm going to shade on the other side actually. And there's my answer. All the points, but not including that dotted line in the shaded region, are answers to this. Now I'm going to click on the check button. And I'm going to see that we are all good to go there. All right, let's go on to question number 6. Okay, here's another one of these problems. I'm going to copy it down over here again. Probably should give myself a little bit more room here. Okay, remember what to do. So let's move this term to the other side. Now remember that's like a negative 1x. Add 1x to both sides. Let's see what we have left over. Those will cancel. Bring this down. Remember to write that 1x first. Remember what to do next. That 4 needs to go by division. Final step. Let's divide. Let's see. You got y is less than 1/4 x. There's my slope. Minus 4. It's time to graph this now. So my y-intercept is negative 4. Choose the line tool. Okay, there we go. My slope is 1/4. That means I will go up 1, right 4. And there is my line. However, I need to look at this symbol and notice that that means it's a dotted line. So I'm going to change this to a dotted line. And then the last thing, we need to look and see where are the solutions. So I'm going to go ahead and select 0, 0 once again. Remember, the only time you shouldn't use it is if it's on the line. Choose a different point. So I'm going to put a 0 in for y, a 0 in for the x, and this is not true. 0 is not smaller than negative 4, so this is false. So like my last problem, the point is on the wrong side. So the solution is on the other side of the boundary line. Okay, we got time for one more question. We can check that answer too. Now you got 3 attempts to do each problem. Let's see what this last question is all about. Let's go to number 7, everybody. Okay, now this one, you have to write the inequality for that graph. Well, let's take a good look at this. First of all, it's a dotted line, isn't it? So what that means is that this cannot be the answer. This cannot be the answer. Okay? Rule those out. The next thing is this graph is shaded above the y-intercept. So I'm going to give you a little tip here. If it's shaded above the y-intercept, you want to choose a greater than symbol. So it's got to be that selection. So I'm going to click on that. And now I'm going to try to enter my information. Now, before I do so, I need a y-intercept and I need a slope. So I'm going to list some information over here. So it looks to me like B, the y-intercept, is right here, everybody. It's 5. And my slope, let me erase some of this, give myself some room here. My slope needs to be a fraction, right? Rise over run. So I'm going to start at this point and I'm going to end up over here. So I would actually need to go down, let's see, 1, 2, 3. And I need to go to the right 4. So my slope is negative 3/4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type that information in here. And there's a fraction key and so forth. Now I'm not actually going to type it right now, but if I were to do that, I'd put y, there's the greater than symbol, negative 3/4, don't forget your x, and then my b is 5. And then you can check it. And that's today's lesson. Your homework assignment is listed in Google Classroom, and it's actually going to be on the ALEKS program.